Good afternoon. This is Brian Hitzelberger, your art appreciation instructor, and this is week 13 of your online art appreciation class. So the topic for this week is surrealism, and this is actually its own chapter and its own reading in the book, and it's actually pretty significant. In some ways it feels very dated, but I actually want you to think about this week for your video post about how surrealism and the philosophies that started it are still relevant today and still influencing art and media and culture today. All right, so let's take a look at the topic. This week we encounter, among other things, the art movement known as surrealism in our text. For many, surrealism comprises some of the most challenging works of art to enjoy aesthetically, critically, or intellectually. In short, Salvador Dali is a far cry from Monet's water lilies. You don't necessarily have to know a lot about art or painting or anything like that to think that Monet's water lilies are beautiful. They're simply beautiful. Because you know about the Impressionists and everything that was happening at the time they were being created. You also know a lot about Monet's imperative to create his water lilies and why he painted them the way he did. Surrealist art is much more difficult, I think, to enjoy from a purely retinal standpoint, from just looking at it. And I want you to think about why that is. Surrealism was truly a shift in the movements of art history up to this point. In some sense, each shift in art history we have seen represents some kind of shift in the consciousness of the society who's making the art. Surrealism is no different, but the movement's truest disciples threw sense, or what we think of as sense, out of the window. So they were making art that didn't make sense. This has had tremendous implications in the history of art, and it still influences much of the art and culture we enjoy and create today. For this week's post, I would like you to discuss and describe a work of art that exists today and was created within the last 10 years that has its roots in surrealism. Okay? So a work of art that was made within the last 10 years that couldn't exist without surrealism happening. This is a work of art that is made within the last 10 years that in some way throws sense out the window or frustrates your expectations, leads you to believe that a certain thing is one way but then shows you it is another, etc. Think about and look at carefully some of the earliest works of surrealism made by the first surrealists themselves, and then just reflect on your own experience as a viewer. What's something you've seen? And it could be a television show, it could be an episode of a television show, a movie, a commercial work of graphic design, a painting, an illustration. It doesn't matter what it is. But it has to, in some way, owe itself to surrealism. Okay, this is a tricky one because you're really going to have to think hard about not only a lot of what you've seen recently, but why and how it was made. Okay, so an example to get you started. And I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with this TV show. It recently had a second season, which is why I feel like it could be appropriate. But you can't use this example. Is the television show Twin Peaks, made by the director David Lynch. If you're familiar with it, there are many moments where you are actually led to believe that something appears to be one way, but it's something else. Additionally, there are moments or characters or bits of dialogue that are thrown in that don't really seem to make sense. And the idea of making sort of a straightforward form of sense, just kind of, oh, this is how I get it. It goes from point A to point B, da-da-da-da. The story doesn't really work like that. That's just not really how the story is told or how the show unfolds. And yet, it is a powerful and moving work of art, I think. So that would be a contemporary example. I want you to think of something like that and tell me how it relates. Same time frame as usual. And I also want to draw your attention to the fact that your graded activity number 5 is going to be due on Sunday, April 15th. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.